303.42. That's Apple right now, down about 11% since earnings. 100 shares at that price is $30,342. Or you can control those same 100 shares for a fraction of that cash using one options contract most traders never touch. That's the stock replacement trade. And today we're building one for real, off a real chain, using the exact pullback Apple just had. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Chalk Talks with Coach B. Real quick, look at what just happened to Apple. It closed near 340 on Tuesday, reported earnings Thursday after the bell, and by Friday's close, it had dropped to 308.91. It's kept drifting lower since, and now sits at 303.42. When a stock falls like that, a lot of traders start thinking about getting in cheaper, and that's exactly the itch this trade scratches. Not by chasing shares, but by controlling the same exposure for a lot less cash. This one leans on two things we've already covered: reading an options chain and delta from the Greeks video. So if either of those is fuzzy, go watch those first. I'll link them up top. And as always, drop your questions in the comments. Let's define it in one breath. LEAPS just means an option dated more than a year out. Deep in the money means you pick a strike well below the stock's price. Put those two together and you get the stock replacement trade, a single long call that behaves like owning the shares for a lot less cash. One thing up front, this is only the replacement leg. It's the exact building block the poor man's covered call is built on, but we are not selling a short call against it today. That's its own video already on the channel. I'll link it at the end. Let me pull up a real chain. This is Apple, 31 days to expiration, strike 255. About 16% below the stock. Delta's already at 0.96, almost dollar for dollar with the stock because there's barely any time left for anything else to happen. Break that 51.50 ask into two pieces. $48 and change is intrinsic. That's just spot minus strike, real locked in value. The other $3 and change is extrinsic, time value, and that's the only slice that can ever decay to zero. Now stretch that exact same idea out past a year, and that's your LEAPS. Same deep strike, way more runway. Delta actually comes down a touch, more like 80 to 85, because there's more time for the stock to wander before expiration. That's fine. 85 Delta still tracks the stock closely, moving about 85 cents for every dollar it moves. You're paying more extrinsic for that longer runway, but it bleeds off way slower than a 31-day contract. Here's the capital story. 100 shares right now is $30,342. A deep in the money LEAPS at that same strike typically runs somewhere around a third to half of that, depending on the exact contract. So you're controlling the identical 100 shares for a fraction of the cash. This isn't some fringe trick either. Bill Ackman's Pershing Square famously ran this exact play on Nike, buying deep in the money LEAPS instead of the stock outright. Let's run the scenarios off real Delta math. Say Apple bounces back $20 from here up around 323. Your 100 shares gain $2,000. Your LEAPS at an assumed 85 Delta gains around $1,700, less in raw dollars, but on a fraction of the capital, so the percentage return is way bigger. Now, the one you always plan for first, the downside. Say the selling isn't over and Apple drops another $30 from here. 100 shares lose $3,000. Your LEAPS, same assumed 85 Delta, loses about $25.50. Fewer total dollars, sure, but that's a much bigger hit to a much smaller stake. Wrong direction still loses money, whether you own the shares or the LEAPS. Less capital on the table does not mean less risk on that capital, and there's a real list of what you give up versus just owning the stock. No dividend hits your account. No voting rights at the shareholder meeting. The contract has an expiration date. The actual shares never do. So eventually you have to roll it, exercise it, or close it. And the spread's wider too. On that real chain we looked at, about $3.70 between bid and ask on a $51 option is a real cost every time you trade it, way more than the penny-wide spread on the stock itself. One more scenario sideways. If Apple just sits at 303 for a year, your shares sit there too. No gain, no loss. Your LEAPS, though, still has that little extrinsic sliver melting away towards zero by expiration. It's small because you went deep in the money, but it's not nothing. That's the toll for the cheaper ticket. Here's the biggest thing to remember, especially after a drop like this one. A cheaper entry doesn't fix a bad thesis. Only run this on a name you genuinely want to own outright. Same rule as the wheel. The LEAPS gets you in for less cash. It does not turn a bad stock into a good trade, and it definitely doesn't mean the bottom is in just because the price fell. Quick reminder, this is education, not financial advice. I'm not telling you to buy or sell anything. Do your own research. So that's the stock replacement trade. One deep in the money LEAPS standing in for 100 shares for a fraction of the cash with real trade-offs. You now know cold. If this clicked, go watch the poor man's covered call. That's this exact LEAPS with a short call sold against it for income. And if you want the plain covered call version with real shares, that video's on the channel too. Hit like and subscribe and drop a comment with the next strategy you want me to break down. Good luck in the markets no matter what stock you're into.